You start. Distinguished guests,
διακεκριμένοι φίλοι, φιλοξενούμενοι, αγαπητοί ομιλητές, σας καλωσορίζω εδώ σήμερα σε αυτή την εκδήλωση που οργανώνεται από το γραφείο του Ευρωκοινοβουλίου εδώ στην Κύπρο. Ήθελα επίσης να καλωσορίσω τους φίλους μας που έρχονται με ζωντανή μετάδοση από τα κοινωνικά μέσα και θα παρακολουθήσουν στο διαδίκτυο την συνεδρίαση αυτή. Προτού προχωρήσω, θα ήθελα απλώς, επιτρέψτε μου, μία μικρή παράκαμψη, γιατί είναι η τελευταία εκδήλωση που ο Ανδρέας Κετής, ο επικεφαλής του Ευρωκοινοβουλίου στην Κύπρο, οργανώνει από την Κύπρο, από τη Λευκοσία, γιατί προχωρεί στην καινούργια του θέση στις Βρυξέλλες. Άρα, Ανδρέα, επιτρέψτε μας να πούμε εκ μέρους και των δυο μας ότι θα μας λείψεις, αλλά θα βεβαιωθούμε, θα φροντίσουμε να σε ξαναφέρουμε στη Λευκοσία και να σε επισκεφτούμε και στις Βρυξέλλες οπωσδήποτε. Ωραία, σήμερα φιλοξενούμε την Annita Demetriou, πρόεδρος του DISY, τον Tufan Erhürman, πρόεδρος του Ρεπουμπλικανικού Τουρκικού Κόμματος ΣΕΤΕΠΕ και τον Stefanou, Γενικό Γραμμάτεα του AKEL. Ευχαριστούμε σε όλους για τη συμμετοχή σας. Αυτή η εκδήλωση λαμβάνει η χώρα μέσα στο πλαίσιο των γιορτασμών για την ημέρα της Ευρώπης 2025 και σίγουρα μέσα στο πνεύμα του τι είναι η Ευρωπαϊκή Ένωση. Η Ευρωπαϊκή Ένωση είναι οικονομικό, εμπορικό έργο, είναι δημοκρατική λέσχη. Πρώτα απ' όλα λέω ότι είναι ένα πρόγραμμα ειρήνης και επειδή είναι ένα πρόγραμμα ειρήνης, νιώθουμε ότι πολλά διδάγματα μπορούν να αντληθούν.
We would like to inform you about the housekeeping rules of our panel. Headsets that are translated in 3 languages: Greek number 1, English number 2, and Turkish number 3. All the participants are welcome to express their statements and questions in any of the 3 languages, in line with the philosophy applied at European Parliament meetings. This panel is streamed live on European Parliament office in Cyprus, Facebook page, and YouTube channel.
Now, this first round will consist of the same introductory question for every panelist. We are inviting you, dear speakers, to comment on the following. In your opinion, could the EU act as a catalyst to the Cyprus problem solution, and how? Could any lessons applicable to Cyprus be drawn from the history and the vision of the European Union? You have 5 minutes for your opening statement. The floor is yours. Ms. Demetriou.
Mr. Getis said that I have to speak, or I will prefer to speak in Greek, correct? Από όταν θα μιλήσω στα ελληνικά.
I will speak in Greek because, as Mr. Getis said, we must promote multilingualism in the European Union. And we're going to miss Mr. Getis very much, and I'd like to thank him and all of you who are here today. I see many familiar faces, and the fact is, and perhaps those who are more interested, and this should concern us. It's, of course, the Cyprus problem that concerns us more and the future of Cyprus. Nonetheless, we need to have such initiatives. I was talking to dear Mrs. Markouli the other day, and we said exactly this, and I'm very glad we're finding ourselves together in such an excellent event. I will begin with something which Mr. Getis told me as I was coming in with this photograph. We see a photograph behind us which precisely notes the end of a hostility, of a war. This is what the European Union was. It's on these principles that it was based in order to be able to show as a necessity safety, security, cooperation, which country, which state, which edifice can have a future when it either continues to be divided or occupied or is in a state of instability, which of course affects all citizens. Therefore, what we need to understand is that, of course, dear Ms. Kokidu-Prokopiou, Europe is a catalyst and must be a catalyst, and this is what is needed because Cyprus continues to be the last divided, Nicosia is the last divided capital in the world. And I'm glad that we have some young people here, and this shows the concerns of the younger generation to put an end to what has been going on for about 5 decades in our country. Our country continues to be occupied. Our country is still, human rights still violated in our country. And of course, we must say that the European Union, and we'd like to salute the position of Mr. Hans in a position that will, I believe, help the effort to restart negotiations, dear ambassadors, because European security does not concern only Europe, but every member state, including, of course, the Cyprus Republic, and European security must be based on democracy itself, human rights, international law. And this does not apply in Cyprus. So therefore, I conclude that the best security for all of us, Greek Cypriots, Turkish Cypriots, Armenians, Latins and Maronites, is the European Union. Without guarantees, without anachronistic frameworks, precisely I consider the best advantage, best diplomatic advantage of Cyprus to be the full accession, its course over 20 years in the European edifice, and it is this framework, I believe, must and will help our efforts for a common future. Cyprus cannot have a favorable future if the situation continues as we know it. So we must all contribute in this direction, and above all, to stop sowing fear, hostility, enmity, misinformation, which is something that we were discussing earlier with our young people before the event began, which unfortunately we have to handle. And all of these things take us back to times that we want to forget. These pictures that you're looking at and other many, many images that we see are those that show us that there's only one route, that we must go forward with leadership and reunite our country and give it the future that it deserves. The EU must be at our side in this effort.
Evet, ben de çok teşekkür ediyorum bu davet için.
Thank you very much for this invitation and for giving me the opportunity to speak. Let me quickly give an answer to the question and say what I would say first. Of course, the European Union, to play a catalyst role in resolving the Cyprus problem, is possible. However, for this to be achieved, we need to accept certain things ahead at the beginning. And otherwise, efforts will not be meaningful enough. Yes, there is a decision taken at the 1999 Helsinki summit, and the events that followed, in quotations, led to the Republic of Cyprus becoming an EU member state. However, there is a reality in front of us. The current situation here is an abnormal situation, and this is being stipulated in UN Security Council resolutions that the status quo is not acceptable, so we cannot pretend as if everything is normal. And my second point is that what we call the Republic of Cyprus at the moment is exclusively administered by the Greek Cypriots, and it represents the Greek Cypriots. The Turkish Cypriots are not included. According to the 1960 Constitution, Greek Cypriots can only make decisions together with Turkish Cypriots, but as we all know, the Greek Cypriots have been making decisions without Turkish Cypriots since 1963. However, according to the 1960 system, Turkish Cypriots as well as Greek Cypriots are the equal partners of the Republic. And another reality is that the outcome of the Annan Plan referenda showed that the Turkish Cypriots have overwhelmingly voted in favor, whereas the Greek Cypriots have overwhelmingly voted against the solution. And the constructive approach of the Turkish Cypriots did not lead to any solution, even though it has been registered and recognized by the international community. So I believe if the EU wants to act as a catalyst, it needs to take all these facts into consideration. Of course, following 2004, there was a statement in Annan's report. Following the vote in the decision of the Turkish Cypriots is to be welcomed, and there is no legitimate reasoning for the embargoes and isolations imposed on Turkish Cypriots. Of course, even though the report stated that, the outcome has not been any different. Still today in the European Parliament, the island of Cyprus has 6 seats at the European Parliament. At least 2 should belong to Turkish Cypriots. However, currently, 6 out of 6 of these seats are being filled by Greek Cypriots. This is an abnormality. My second point would be about the direct trade. As we all remember, even before the outcome of the Annan Plan referendum, Turkish Cypriots were promised the direct trade regulation, and it has not been adopted until 2025. Another important point is that even though Guterres reported, any lifting of isolations is taken to be as upgrading the northern part of the island, and these are being prevented with the fear of recognition by implication. I would like to say a few more things. So regarding the solution of the Cyprus problem, we always hear that we need to resume from where we have left off in Crans-Montana. The European Parliament's latest report also states that. Of course, there were statements in Guterres' reports that any resumption of the talks will be a phased approach, should be a phased approach with a timeline, and it should be result-oriented. So these are things that we don't see in the report of the latest report of the European Parliament. Another issue is the issue of political equality. Even though it is being mentioned as a concept, I believe it is an important and sensitive issue for Turkish Cypriots, and rotational presidency, for instance, which is also important for Turkish Cypriots, has not been mentioned at all in that particular report, together with Okay, so there are important matters regarding international relations, energy, hydrocarbons, security, trade routes, maritime exclusive zones. So these are very important issues that have an impact on international relations, and currently we have issues regarding those as well, because the administration of the Republic is having continuous relations and contacts regarding these, and any development regarding these will have an impact on the Turkish Cypriots, and their will should be reflected in any agreement that will be made in these aspects as well, because all these agreements to be concluded will be concluded in the name of the overall island. However, these decisions are only being taken by the will of the Greeks. Cypriots. I would like to Okay, I finish. I will continue when I have the floor again. But my point was that yes, EU can become a catalyst and should become a catalyst, should assume that role. However, these are the realities that should not be ignored, because by ignoring these realities that I have mentioned will not lead to the desired results in the end.
Ευχαριστώ για την πρόσκληση να είμαι σήμερα εδώ.
Thank you for inviting me to be here today for this interesting discussion. I thank the young people who are also present here and will participate in the discussion. Thank you all for being here. The question put forth is whether, in our opinion, the EU can act as a catalyst to achieve a solution on the Cyprus issue. I don't think it's a matter of opinion. It is a fact. It has been proven by life itself. In 2004, it was the result of a process which was based on the Helsinki decisions, which did not only pertain to Cyprus, but included matters concerning Cyprus and the recognition that Cyprus could accede the EU without a solution, and acceding country status would be given to Turkey. I think that the EU could contribute by providing incentives. And back then, incentives were given. A process was given. We have proceeded. And irrespective of the result, we have to see that on the EU platform, on the occasion of the prospect of accession to the EU, a process was put into motion that for the first time happened in the Cyprus issue. So that's proof that the EU can and must act as a catalyst for the resolution of the Cyprus problem, on two conditions. First, that it will be resolved on the basis of the decisions of the UN and the bicommunal federation with political equality. And at the same time, we have to bear in mind that the solution will not be achieved by any third parties, but it must come about by the two communities in the context of a bicommunal dialogue. And of course, the international aspects will be discussed in an international context, an international conference, with the guarantor powers as well, a role that they had taken on with the 1960 agreements. Now, how can the EU be a catalyst? I have 4 points. The first has to do with something I mentioned earlier: common incentives, common interests. In contemporary politics, it's very simple. If you want to resolve an issue, look at the common interests and the incentives that would make the parties move towards a solution. The European Union and the European prospect and the presence of the Republic of Cyprus in the EU does offer that prospect to disentangle and to offer incentives to continue negotiations from where we left off at Grand Montana. The second is the role of the EU in the talks. The presence of the EU helped achieve very important convergences that help the functionality of a solution, because the EU knows that if the solution is not functional, then the problems will impact negatively the functionality of the EU itself. There are such issues, and the EU tried to, through Protocol 10, to integrate them in the accession of Cyprus without a solution. And there are some other things I won't go into right now. There is an effort temporarily to settle these, whether it be by Green Line regulation, Protocol 10, yet they are temporary. They will not take us forward in the long run unless the Cyprus issue is resolved. Time is running out. Yes, the relations between the Turkish and Greek Cypriot communities. The EU can offer a lot in building confidence and trust between the two communities. And one last thing, with the solution of the Cyprus issue, we will be looking at platforms that will help in the functionality of a solution, and that's the EU. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now I'm going to ask one question to Mrs. Annita Demetriou, and then one question to Stefanos. And then my friend Anna is going to ask a question to Mr. Tufan Erhürman. Mrs. Demetriou, my question to you is, if you become the next president of Republic of Cyprus, what would you do different than the current president's policies about Cyprus issue?
Θέλω να πιστεύω.
I hope that by then, 2028, we will have had a solution of the Cyprus problem, so we won't have to discuss about what the president would do differently as president. And a solution concerns us all. But I want to say something else, because you know that every period, every year that passes is against us. Things are worse every year. So therefore, I want to believe that we will have positive developments by 2028, which I personally consider politically immature for anybody to be thinking about themselves, either political ambitions for afterwards, when we have to handle and discuss this so important issue. But I want to say something else, if you will allow me, because I heard earlier what was said. I feel that somewhere we're having a blame game or a memorial service. Has any prospect on efforts ended, and we're now trying to say who is to blame more or less? No. We must understand that just as there are denominators on one side, there are on the other side as well. And I could cite quite a lot of these, but this discussion does not help. So we must see how through through being full members of the European Union, we will see how we can restart the talks in the agreed framework. And the President of the Republic is the President of all Cypriots. And this is how he's behaving, and this is how he should be behaving. Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots.
You told me that we are talking about 2028.
Yes.
Yes? And by that time, we are going to solve the Cyprus issue.
Ελπίζω.
And
we hope so.
What you just said, and if I got it right from the translation, what do you know that we don't know? Because there is no negotiation table continuing at the moment, and by your sayings, even there is no common ground at the moment, so how are we going to make the solution by 2028?
Well, this is a good question, dear Mustafa. The issue is whether we have learned something in politics is when we have the greatest impasses, we have the greatest opportunities. So we have to work in that direction. I want to be romantically optimistic and hope that we will proceed. We have the talks coming up in Geneva at the end of July. we don't have any indications, of course, you're right, of any reality, but we must never stop fighting and working for this. In Europe, a parallel discussion is going on about the participation of Turkey in the architecture of security and defense. Perhaps this will be a discussion that will put pressure on Turkey a little bit to become aware that it is to its own interests if it fulfills and it behaves like a different member state and fulfills its obligations relating to Cyprus to participate in this edifice. Otherwise, it won't be able to do it. So therefore, this could be some sort of bait, if you like, or a temptation, something which will Turkey is unfortunately discussing, which is about two states. The only way to go forward is, as Mr. Stefanou said, and I agree with him, we got close. We got close once. If we got close once, we can get close again. So if indeed we are able in some way, through the dynamics as they're evolving, and of course things are developing in a dangerous way, but that we should try and work all together in the direction that will be a solution that at the end of the day will ensure the rights of both Greek and Turkish Cypriots. And this is what we want. And this is what we want there to be. But in my humble opinion, and I close with this, we must not have memorial services about what happened before, why did this happen, why didn't this happen, who is to blame. It's as if it's all over and there's no prospect. And if we discuss from that basis, there's no reason for being here.
Demetriou, and now my question is going to be to Stefanou, and I'm going to ask in Turkish, so it's better if you can put your headset. Yes. Sayın Stefanou,
Mr. Stefanou, you are the Secretary General of a party that voted against the Annan Plan, and you are the Secretary General of a party that prevented the reunification of Cyprus. So what I would like to know is the following. For what kind of plan would AKEL say yes? Because as Mr. Erhürman put, political equality is part of the UN resolution of the parameters. And would you accept a plan where Turkish Cypriots would have rotating presidency? And what should be the content of a plan in order for that plan to be accepted by AKEL?
Thank you for your question. I'm not going to go back to 2004, although I could discuss for many hours. I'm going to talk about today with the prospect of tomorrow. You're asking me what solution plan we could accept, what is being supported. There's a bizonal, bicommunal federation with political equality, which is an agreed solution basis adopted by both sides, adopted in a series of resolutions of the United Nations, adopted by the European Union and various other organizations of Europe. Secondly, we are convinced that, in essence, the basic core of the solution has been shaped and can be found through the convergences that have already been achieved through negotiations that have taken place over all these years, and at the climax of this, at Grand Montana. It is precisely for this reason that if we had the presidency and the leadership of the Greek Cypriot community, the first thing we would do would be to recognize the negotiation AKEL and the convergences that had been achieved between Christofias, Talat, and, by the way, my dear friend, for asking me if I accept a presidency by rotation, a child of Talat, and Christofias is the rotating presidency. How can I not accept a child which is ours? And this is part of the negotiating AKEL. Therefore, we would recognize the convergences. We are prepared to discuss in order for us to all be agreed about what the convergences are. Of course, the convergences include the content of political equality, not just the recognition that there will be political equality, but the content of political equality, which is agreed already, and the Greek Cypriot side must recognize this. As also, part of the AKEL must also be, and must be recognized by the Turkish Cypriot side, that with the solution of the Cyprus problem, there will be an end to the system of guarantees, the anachronistic guarantees system, which has existed since the 60s. It will be replaced by a system for implementing the solution, as the Secretary General of the United Nations has put down an informal document at Grand-Montana. It will provide for a speedy departure, withdrawal of troops, and there won't be the so-called rights of one-side unilateral intervention. We have the core of the solution, but we must break the deadlock and continue from where we left off and safeguard the convergences and negotiate based on the Guterres framework, not the Guterres framework, negotiate the pending issues which are recorded by the Secretary General within his framework. How will this be done? I spoke earlier about the need for there to be incentives and common interests. This is why we're going to put forward a positive agenda which will have as its recipient both Turkey and the Turkish Cypriot community. Here, the European environment, the EU-Turkish relations, the presence of Cyprus in Europe gives us this possibility, but the positive agenda will include also the issues related to energy developments in our area, and the energy issues that concern Cyprus. We have put forward a very specific proposal as to how energy can operate as a chapter that will liberate incentives and interests in order for everyone to move in the direction of a solution. This proposal does not cancel or abolish sovereign rights of the Cyprus Republic, but certainly gives opportunities, gives possibilities for us to be able to liberate dynamics, break the deadlock, and continue our negotiations. If this is done, I'm optimistic, as long as we have the political will, of course. I'm sure that in a short space of time we can achieve strategic agreement that will mark the road towards a complete solution of the Cyprus problem. I will ask you something which I believe concerns not only the Greek Cypriots, but the Turkish Cypriots as well, through discussions that we have had. The position that is expressed, you too seeking the leadership of the Turkish Cypriot community, what has been expressed is not the same position as the official position, the new position, at any rate, that is expressed by Turkey. The position that is expressed by Mr. Tatar and the official leadership of the Turkish Cypriots, of two states. You say something different, which, of course, whether someone agrees or disagrees, the question is, if you were the leader of the Turkish Cypriots, how would you propose something which is totally different from what Turkey wants? Is this wishful thinking that you're proposing, or can it indeed be implemented in politics?
Teşekkür ederim. Kıbrıs Türk halk.
Thank you. Of course, I have actually announced that I am running for leadership. Of course, as Greek Cypriots have consultations with Greece in determining their positions in certain issues, Turkish Cypriots also consult with Turkey in making certain decisions. Turkey is, of course, as we all know, is a guarantor power. It was there in Geneva, and it will take its place at any negotiation table. This is why actually Mr. Guterres invites Turkey to participate in any meetings as well. Of course, as the Republican Turkish Party, we believe in a bizonal, bicommunal federation. This is not discussable for us, based on political equality. But of course, I hear everyone saying that let's leave everything behind. Let's not talk about past. But we have been through these. We've been through Kran-Montana, Talat Christofias negotiations, from the Annan Plan up until 2017, we couldn't achieve successful results. If we're going to resume the talks, there should be a substance of it. And I believe we have to review this methodology that was adopted in the past, because it did not yield a positive result. I'm not saying this to blame anyone, but if we want to be successful, we have to find answers to the question why we had failed in the past. And we are saying that this methodology needs to be reviewed, because I heard that political equality is fine and rotational presidency is acceptable. However, what happens with security and guarantees? Security and guarantees is a substance that needs to be discussed by the guarantors as well. However, political equality should not be subject to any give and take. And I am very clear about this, because political equality is UN Security Council resolution, and it should not be traded or be a subject of give and take for anything that is not in UN Security Council resolutions. Mr. Guterres told that negotiations from now on should not be similar to those of the past. In what ways they should not be like that? He said those should be time-bound. So we need to speak about the substance. So I believe it is a must for any negotiation to start to be time-bound. Is this acceptable? We were told that all the convergences so far should be there. Is this acceptable? Do you agree? One favorable vote. This is not an issue for discussion. This is not a matter of give and take. So we are not trying to play the blame game. We are not going back to 2004 and saying we said yes, you said no. There is actually a very nice line of a Turkish poet. There is something I have learned from what I experienced. So we also have to learn from our experiences, and this time, if we sit around the table, this should be to find the solution. We shouldn't be sitting there to discuss about the substance of a solution. Whoever can play the role of a catalyst should play, because we want to achieve solution. About the Great Sea Interconnector. Mr. Stefanou also referred to it. But doesn't the EU know that this is not feasible? Doesn't the EU know that this does not make economic sense? This concerns about kilometers of pipelines to be placed under the sea. Don't we all know that it makes sense for the line to go through Cyprus via Turkey to Greece? And I believe that achieving this Great Sea Interconnector via Turkey will change the environment, the atmosphere completely. So we can't simply say, let's resume from where we left off from Kran-Montana. But then there I ask. So we want to start off from there because it was so nice, but why did it fail? Why did Mr. Anastasiadis left the table? And Mr. Christodoulidis was a close colleague to him. So why are we talking about starting from where we left off? When Mr. Akıncı and Anastasiadis met in Berlin and achieved more clearance regarding political equality? Why did we not speak of Berlin, the achievements, the convergences of Berlin in Crans-Montana? I mean, I'm sitting here with very close friends of mine. However, we should be talking about the substance itself. We should question why we have failed so far and what do we need to do not to fail in the future. And the European Union also need to give us, take the initiative. They should admit that the Great Sea Interconnector is not feasible. It does not make economic sense. We need interdependence. We hear everyone saying that any relations, improvements in relations between Greece and Turkey will help, will contribute. But if we want to create a catalyst for a solution, we want to speak about all these issues. If we keep ignoring them, I don't think this will lead us anywhere. If I become the leader of the Turkish Cypriots, then I will say the same things. Yes, the basis for a solution is bizonal, bicommunal federation based on political equality. This should lead us to solution, but up until today, it didn't. I would like to say something very important. It's been 21 years since Annan Plan referendum. Had we practiced the property regime foreseen in the Annan Plan, we wouldn't have any property-related problems today. Had we achieved solution back in 2004, maybe 40% of the property issues would have been resolved. But today, we're faced with this situation. We have got rulings in the south, we have got courts in the north. These are completely separate legal systems. People are being trialed in the courts in the southern part of the island due to their practices in the north. There are Turkish Cypriots who live in the north who have left their property in the south. They're victims of the property situation as well. So what happens? Let's say in the Turkish courts, people people open up court cases regarding their property left in the south, and then this will create more victims out of this problem. What happens? I mean, are we trying to find a solution or create more problems? We're still faced with same problems, and all these developments harm the negotiation process. There are several Interpol warrants, there are several court decisions, separate. Yes, I want to respect the time given to me, but now that we got together and we're able to speak about these issues, I wanted to talk about substance and serious matters. Thank you.
Okay, my question is a bizonal federation. The EU, in its very recent letter sent to Geneva to the negotiating parties, or at least the convened parties, let's say, was very specific of what is acceptable. So what we're discussing is acceptable to people in the room here, is acceptable to you, is what the EU finds acceptable, but this is what Turkey doesn't find acceptable, and it's very vocal about it, because what we hear from Ankara is a two-state solution, and Mr. Tatar is reiterating that. How could you convince Ankara to change its position? But very briefly, I think, you could basically say yes or no, but, that's the $1 million question.
Yani çok iyi anlıyorum.
I understand why you fixate on that question, but I wasn't trying to avoid your question. What I'm trying to say is the following. Turkish Cypriots' will is important. I will be advocating for bicommunal, bizonal federation based on political equality. And this is not my ideological preference. I want to see a solution. And I know that this is the formula put forward for a solution to be achieved in Cyprus. And so this is the base on which I will be acting upon. And I'm not in a position to determine the position of Turkey, but if this is a decision to be made by Turkish Cypriots, our consultation and dialogue will be based on this module. I'm not going to enter into any negotiations with Turkey and tell them that let's do it if I win and so forth. So I am going to run for this office, and I'm telling you what I will be advocating for, and if I win, this will be my position regarding the Cyprus problem.
From youth community, please raise your hand if you would like to speak. Once called upon, kindly stand, introduce yourself and state to whom your question is addressed. Okay, let's start from the beginning. Yes, stand up, please.
Hello, I'm Andreas. I have a question for Mr. Erhürman. As he said, political equality is a sensitive issue for Turkish Cypriots, and also security for Greek Cypriots. If the Annan plan and its rejection by the Greek Cypriot side can teach us, that's it. That's the cherry that was never put on the cake of Grand Montana. So my question is, you as a Turkish Cypriot and potentially a Turkish Cypriot leader, would you be willing to put aside intervention rights and the guarantor status of Turkey? Because the EU does have its models for equality and political protection and solidarity between the member states.
I will leave the floor to you in 1 minute. I think there's a missing point. You have said that the EU has a model about political equality. What did you mean by that? Maybe something was left out. Could you please elaborate on that?
I'm talking about the models, the paradigm for rights and representation of minorities. But my question remains, given the diplomatic acquis that the security of the one side cannot be at the expense of the other one, will you be willing to end the guarantor powers treaty?
From the youth community, please make sure that you give your answers in maximum 1 minute, please. Please.
Bu en zor benim için herhalde ama
Okay.
bu defa
I think this would be the hardest thing to do for me, but I will do my best. You have talked about minorities representation. When you use that term, it means you give up on a solution on Cyprus problem. Turkish Cypriots are not a minority. Turkish Cypriots is one of the two equal founding partners of this state. And whatever negative incident we have experienced is because Turkish Cypriots were considered minority. Turkish Cypriots political equality is not only an issue, sensitive issue for Turkish Cypriots, but also it should be a sensitive issue for Greek Cypriots, because in order for a bicommunal federation to survive in this country, we need political equality. Otherwise, if Turkish Cypriots are to be given minority status and their political will is not to be taken into account, then this cannot be called a federation from the perspective of Turkish Cypriots. And this issue is not up for discussion right now, and it has been discussed throughout the negotiations. Security, yes, sensitive issue, but not only for Greek Cypriots, but also for Turkish Cypriots, because both communities have to feel safe through the models to be found. So if Greek Cypriots say that this is what I experienced in 1974 and I have to feel safe in the future, and what Turkish Cypriots have endured in 1963 is not taken into account, then we cannot find a solution. So the formula, the model we want to achieve is political equality for both sides. And we should definitely abandon the concept of minority. And we need to find a model that will extend security, safety to both communities. Who else wants to ask a question? Başka kim?
Thank you for all the speakers for being here. My question is going to not be directly about Cyprus problem, but on the sidelines of it, and something more current. It's regarding Schengen. The government has recently announced that it aims to access to Schengen zone fully by the end of 2026. In that perspective, how realistic is it given the divide? Wouldn't full but not partial Schengen make the Green Line a de facto border? Just some comments. It's a curiosity.
Καλή ερώτηση και νομίζω επιτέλους και μια ερώτηση που δεν παραπέμπει στο παρελθόν.
That's a good question. Yes, thank you. Because before, of course, and all questions are welcome because our young audience are here because they are interested. My answer to you would be quite the contrary. Cyprus is aiming for that, and it will help us deal with other issues, for example, migration, security, information exchange, and others. The situation is not easy. We do have the Green Line regulation that would be taken into account, and that is where we need the support of the EU. But until that time, we hope there will be such developments that will strengthen this effort. I can't say I'm either optimistic or pessimistic on that. It's a very short timeline. Whatever we need to do on our side, we will do it. There was a time that some people called it a utopia to want to exceed the EU prior to a solution, and yet we did it. So only if the Cyprus issue is resolved can Turkish Cypriots participate in the EU. I heard what Mr. Tufan said, but he didn't tell us that Turkey is not accepting the agreed framework. We cannot change our methodology. The UN is doing the same thing for many countries. And how can you talk about the interconnector when Turkey does not even recognize the legitimacy of the Republic of Cyprus leadership? What kind of negotiations can we have with them on that or any other subject? So we have to look to how we can take a step forward by not creating more problems and obstacles. If we all accept the agreed framework, and we have ambassadors here who know that is the agreed framework of the UN, in the context of the UN, but Turkey does not want to talk on those grounds. I will use as much time as Mr. Tufan had. So let's not demonize. Okay, I will finish. I will stop there then. Any questions for Mr. Stefanou? No? Thank you. My name is Giorgos Isaia from Oxygen for Democracy organization. Mr. Stefanou, if the Cyprus problem is one of the issues for DISY and your own party, AKEL, highest on your agenda, would you be willing to have a common candidate for 2028 elections that would perhaps safeguard the finding of a acceptance or agreement for a solution that could have a chance? We will talk about that when the time comes. And I want to also hope that by 2028 the Cyprus question will be resolved, because it can be. Out of the many good things of European Parliament is this one too. It gives its EMPs 2 minutes time to speak, and I think it would be good for us to adopt that too. Now, about the Schengen question, the biggest challenge for Cyprus would be not to turn the ceasefire line to a hard border. I don't have an opinion on what the government is discussing. We don't know, but that is a prerequisite. Second, the past issues of the two communities can be overcome with a bizonal bicommunal federation, because together with the co-management of the state, both communities can at the same time have autonomy in managing their own unit. So they can cooperate on the joint issues. And of course, let me say that the Turkish Cypriots are not a minority. They are a community. There are 2 communities in Cyprus and 3 religious groups. The problem with the Cyprus issue is not the process, the procedure. The Grand Montana process was fine, because at that procedure, there was an issue of which issues to discuss first and then later. So we were discussing them all together, one table for the domestic and one table for the international aspects. The solution is a matter of political will. We in AKEL, despite the pessimistic climate, if we continue from where we left off, that we safeguard the convergences and so forth, then the solution is not too far. I wish we could have synergies with Turkey for energy and water issues. Is there anyone believing under current conditions that that is feasible? If it cannot be feasible before a solution, let's make that an incentive to resolve the Cyprus issue, and then you will see the consequences, because Turkey and Republic of Cyprus relations will be normalized by then. Now, as at present, Turkey does not recognize the Republic of Cyprus.
One question from the audience. Is there anyone who has a question which is addressed to all 3 speakers? So that would give them the opportunity for their closing statement. Anyone? Okay.
No? Okay.
There's this young lady. Let's give the opportunity to her. Please, very briefly. We're running out of time.
I'll be very brief. My name is Anna, and I'm here with Oxygen for Democracy as well. I have a question that all 3 of you might have a position on. And it's about the elephant in the room that we've been avoiding, and that is the past. And I'm a firm believer in the fact that if we don't agree about the past, it's very hard to move to the future. And we've said as well that the most important thing in solving the Cyprus problem is the political will. How do we have political will if we're not democratically empowered by our people to solve the Cyprus problem? And how are we democratically empowered by our people to solve the Cyprus problem if our people are not united and if they don't agree on what happened in the past? So what do you think about the idea of a truth commission, which has been brought up several times, but never quite concretely? And how would you consider the truth commission as a move forward as opposed to reminiscing or revisiting the past? Thank you.
So the young generation has posed a question. Please be very brief because we have a live transmission that's going to go out in a few minutes. Let's start from left to right. So Mr. Erhürman, 1 minute, Mr. Demetriou, 1 minute, Mr. Stefanou, 1 minute.
Να μου επιτρέψεις, Ανίνα, να ξεκινήσεις από τα αριστερά.
Please begin from left to right this time. No, my left.
Çözümün bulunduğu noktada hakikat komisyonlarının devreye girdiğini görürsünüz. Yani çözüm
Where solutions have been found. So, truth commissions before a solution is found is not a common practice. We need to take the South African example and do it in a right way. And now that I have the floor, maybe I should say that, of course, people are questioning whether DISY and AKEL will have candidates in 2028. But let's say if Annita's will turns to be true by 2028, a Turkish Cypriot can become a candidate as well in 2028. And let us not forget that any basis for a solution will be about the will of both Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots. So Turkish Cypriots' will should not be ignored either. And let me also say that the issue of citizenship of the children from mixed marriages is a serious problem, and I would kindly ask my colleagues who are representatives of major political parties in this room to pay efforts to resolve this, because marriages are decided by people based on their free will, and no one should have the role to say them to who to marry. Thank you.
Να το διευκρινίσουμε όμως, αγαπητέ κύριε Tufan, μην πούν τώρα...
By this, Mr. Tufan, don't say that who's going to be a candidate in 2028. Enough is being said about me. I said that I want to be optimistic. I imagine that that's what Tufan was talking about, and I want to be optimistic. At least whatever we are able to do as the DISY party, we will do it, and we have proved that indeed we care about the future, and this is what we're going to do. I will answer what you said, that it doesn't mean that we must forget, and we're never going to reach the absolute truth on either side, but if we think only about the past, we're going to lose the opportunity of the future. This is what I meant. So therefore, now some opportunities must be seized, and we must all become aware that we must go beyond what we used to do. We must go beyond in order to stop having occupying troops and barbed wire, and going beyond in order to have a lifting of all the illegality and all the challenges and provocations. And I would expect at least an indication on the part of Turkey, since it wants to work with Europe, to stop all these things that are going on that take us backwards and create a bad precedent for our negotiations, all these resolutions from Augusta, Bila, and so on. So therefore, all these illegal acts that are continuing are not helping. I am in favor of this, and I will close with this so I don't take up too much time. I visited Ireland recently. I visited a place which was set up by young people, and Keplin. I'm young people and women who considered that we had to contribute in a positive way, in a parallel effort with the official negotiations, because you can't, obviously, this committee cannot replace official negotiations, but it helped greatly. This was a suggestion, I think it was published by President Christodoulidis, which was not accepted by Mr. Tatar. Nonetheless, I hope that soon we will have some positive developments. We must become aware that we all have the responsibility, and it's not enough just to insist on our own arguments. At some point, we have to think and get into the shoes of the other person, and we must never forget that in this country, an illegal invasion took place, and this will stop when we achieve a solution which will protect the Turkish Cypriots as well. This is what we want. Thank you. Well, as regards the Commission for Truth, I would say yes, definitely, as a process that would reinforce the inclination, the conviction of the two communities that in a common state and a common homeland, both must contribute, recognizing the mistakes, the errors, the crimes of the past on both sides, in order for a solution to function. If we go back to the past, we will see at the basis of the past a basic element that constituted the reason or the excuse for the solution not to operate as it was provided for in the Constitution of 1960 for a bicommunal state. So the dominant position circles, both in the Turkish and Greek Cypriot communities, had not abandoned their own visions of their own community and did not see the bicommunal state as an opportunity for coexistence, for co-managing our state. And that's when things started to go bad. So if we go back to the past, which should teach us and not stay trapped in the past, but see what we can do in order to achieve a solution and have a solution that will function. So the persecutions or nationalities and citizenships have been mentioned. As long as the Cyprus problem is not solved, these things and many other will come and find us. They will become more, the problems will become more intense, and we'll be called upon to find temporary solutions, arrangements rather, which do not solve the problem. So let us stay focused on the solution of the Cyprus problem. This is what we believe in, this is what we'll continue to believe in, and we believe that the European Union will have a role knowing that, helping the whole procedure within, of course, the framework of the United Nations.
Bitirmemiz lazım, zaten vakti geçti.
We need to finish, we need to conclude.
Bitirmek istemezdim ama sevgili Annita'nın işgal denilen zehirli kelimeyi kullanması beni mecbur bıraktı. Bir işgal var, evet. Ben de onu söyleyeyim o zaman. O işgal Kıbrıs Cumhuriyeti'nin tamamen Kıbrıs'ı Türkler dışlanır.
Yes, there is occupation, but that occupation is that the Republic of Cyprus's administration occupies the the seats of the Turkish Cypriots, unfortunately. I didn't want to mention this. I actually wanted to speak about the substance and empathize more.
5 minutes is not bad for a live panel and a live streaming program. Dear panelists, our young friends and distinguished guests, our panel now come to close. Thank you all for your valuable contributions and engagement throughout today's discussions. We would like to also extend our sincere thanks to the European Parliament office in Cyprus, Andreas, Thea, and my dear friend Vangelis. I hope he is around here. And we look forward to welcoming you at our upcoming events. Thank you all for your participation. Thank you.